First, the Future Combat Systems Program. $18 billion for 8 prototypes and nothing more. The year 1999. The United States Army watches the wars in the Persian Gulf and Kosovo and concludes, the future belongs to network-centric warfare, not individual soldiers and vehicles, but a single digital network where everyone sees the entire battlefield in real time. Crewless tanks, combat robots, unmanned reconnaissance. Everything is connected. Everything is automated. It sounds like science fiction, but this is the year 1999. Silicon Valley makes billionaires overnight. The internet changes everything. Why can't the Army do the same? The program was named Future Combat Systems, FCS. The starting budget was about $92 billion for full deployment. The ambitions matched: to completely re-equip the Army with a new generation of vehicles integrated into a single digital network. The problem began to manifest almost immediately. The program requirements were so broad that no one could say exactly what was being developed. Unmanned ground vehicles, which were supposed to operate autonomously in combat, required artificial intelligence technologies that did not yet exist. The network architecture required data transmission standards that had not yet been developed. The light armor demanded by the project was incompatible with the protection needed in real combat, as demonstrated by the war in Iraq that began in 2003. The war in Iraq completely exposed the contradiction in the very idea of FCS. The program was designed for a high-tech war against a peer adversary, maneuverable, fast, and network-centric. The real war turned out to be an insurgency, improvised explosive devices, ambushes in urban neighborhoods. Against this, a different kind of armor was needed: heavy, not light. In 2009, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates canceled the FCS program. By that point, $18.1 billion had been spent. The result? 8 prototypes of various systems. Not a single one of them was adopted into service in its original form. 8 prototypes. 18 billion. One word in the Pentagon's official conclusion that appears most frequently: unrealistic. Second, RAH-66 Comanche, a stealth helicopter for $6.9 billion that never took off in combat. The year 1983. The Army formulates requirements for a new generation helicopter. The task? Replace the aging OH-58 Kiowa in the role of a scout and light attack helicopter. The new machine had to be advanced in every way: stealthy to radars, featuring digital controls, night vision, and speed and range surpassing anything the enemy had. Boeing and Sikorsky teamed up and won the contract in 1991. The result? RAH-66 Comanche. On paper, an outstanding machine. Stealth coating absorbing radar waves. Retractable landing gear. Folding blades for transport in cargo planes. One of the first helicopters with integrated digital avionics. 2 crew members. Armament: Hellfire missiles and a 20mm cannon tucked inside the fuselage to reduce the radar cross-section. Time passed. Problems emerged. The software was more complex than expected. Deadlines shifted. The budget grew. By the early 2000s, the cost of a single helicopter had risen so much that the Army could afford significantly fewer machines than planned. And then came September 11, 2001, and the war in Afghanistan. The Army realized it needed drones, which could hover over a target for hours without risk to the crew. An expensive manned scout looked very different in the new reality compared to 1983. In February 2004, the Comanche program was canceled. 2 flight prototypes, $6.9 billion spent. The plan was to buy 1,213 helicopters. Not a single one was bought. The money was redirected to drones and the modernization of the existing helicopter fleet. What exactly should have been done from the very beginning was a question that people in the Army preferred not to discuss out loud. Third, Star Wars. $30 billion for a shield against nuclear missiles that was never built. March 23, 1983. President Reagan delivers a televised address to the nation. He proposes a revolutionary concept, a missile defense system that would make nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. Lasers in space. Interceptors in orbit. A nuclear strike is intercepted mid-flight before the missiles reach the territory of the United States. The program was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI. The press immediately dubbed it Star Wars. Physicists and engineers were skeptical from day one, tracking hundreds of missiles simultaneously in real time and destroying them with laser beams from space. This required computing power that did not exist, software that did not exist, lasers of a power that did not exist. The Soviet Union publicly ridiculed the program, but in private conversations, according to data that became known later, the Soviet leadership took it seriously. If the United States created a working interception system, Soviet nuclear deterrence would lose its meaning. The Soviet Union began spending massive resources to develop means of overcoming the potential shield, maneuvering warheads, decoys, low-flying cruise missiles. Some historians believe that this very pressure on the Soviet economy, the need to respond to SDI, accelerated its collapse. This is a debatable thesis, but the fact that SDI changed the strategic calculus of both sides is undeniable. By 1993, President Clinton canceled the program in its original form. Around $30 billion had been spent. No working shield was created. Not a single Soviet missile was intercepted by a laser from space, because no such laser existed. The program continued to exist in a scaled-down form as a ground-based system. No longer Star Wars, but simply missile defense. It operates with varying success today as well. But of Reagan's original concept, only a name in history textbooks remains. Write in the comments, which of the first three decisions seems to you like the most expensive mistake? $18 billion for 8 prototypes? Almost $7 billion for a helicopter that was never bought even once? Or $30 billion for a shield that was never built? Fourth, the British Nimrod MRA-4. £4 billion for 9 aircraft that never flew. In the late 1990s, Great Britain decided to modernize its fleet of Nimrod patrol aircraft, anti-submarine machines based on the Comet aircraft, the world's first jet airliner. The logic was simple. The Nimrod MR2 is already old. A replacement is needed. But instead of buying a ready-made aircraft from someone else, take the existing Nimrod MR2 airframes and completely rebuild them to the new standard. New avionics, new engines, new surveillance systems. Saving money on developing a new fuselage from scratch. British Aerospace received the contract in 1996. Fixed price, about £2.8 billion. Term, 9 years. Then something unexpected turned out. The original Nimrod aircraft were built by hand in the 1960s. Each airframe was slightly different. The fuselage dimensions of one machine differed from another by a few centimeters. No one took this into account when designing the new components. When the new wings and engines began to be installed on the old airframes, they didn't fit. Each aircraft required individual adjustment. What should have taken a few weeks for mass production took months. Deadlines shifted. The budget grew. By 2010, the cost of the program exceeded £4 billion, and not a single aircraft had been put into service yet. In 2010, the Cameron government announced the cancellation of the program as part of large-scale defense budget cuts. 9 almost finished aircraft, some 95% complete, were sent to be scrapped. For comparison, India at the same time was buying American Boeing P-8 Poseidons, a modern patrol aircraft of the same class, for about £160 million per unit. Less than a third of what Great Britain would have spent on each of its Nimrods. £4 billion, 0 aircraft in service, and a few centimeters of difference in the sizes of the old fuselages, which no one checked before signing the contract. Fifth, MBT-70. Germany and the United States were building a tank together and spent $1 billion to part ways. The mid-1960s. The Cold War is in full swing. The United States and West Germany decide to join forces and create a joint next-generation main battle tank. The logic is excellent. Share development costs, get unified equipment in the armies of both countries, and strengthen the alliance. The program was named MBT-70, Main Battle Tank 1970. The technical requirements were ambitious. An autoloader to reduce crew size, hydro-pneumatic suspension with adjustable clearance, missile armament launched through the barrel, an automatic fire control system. The problems began with the very first meeting. American and German engineers worked in different units of measurement, inches versus centimeters. Technical standards of the two armies diverged in the details. Requirements continued to change as development progressed. By 1969, the cost of a single tank rose to $1 million, with the initial planned cost being significantly less. Total program expenses by that point amounted to about $303 million, against the $80 million planned initially. Germany withdrew from the program and started its own development, which ultimately led to the creation of the Leopard 2. The United States continued, but then also canceled the program and started its own, which led to the M1 Abrams. Both results, Leopard 2 and M1 Abrams, turned out to be outstanding tanks. They are still in service today. But the joint program that was supposed to save money for both countries spent it without saving anything. Official outcome: more than $300 million spent. 2 prototypes built. The program is closed. Both countries went their separate ways. 6th, the United States Army UCP camouflage uniform. $5 billion for a uniform that made soldiers more visible. The year 2004. The United States Army introduces a new uniform. Universal Camouflage Pattern, UCP. A gray-green pixelated pattern. Official justification: a universal camouflage suitable for any terrain. Desert, forest, urban environment. Significant resources were spent on development. Computer modeling was conducted. It was tested on various backgrounds. But there was something that wasn't tested thoroughly enough: the real battlefield. Soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq started complaining almost immediately. The UCP uniform blended with the environment poorly practically everywhere. In the Afghan mountains, it was too light. In the Iraqi deserts, too dark and bluish. In green vegetation, it didn't work at all. The Marine Corps, which used its own MARPAT camouflage with a smaller and more detailed pattern, looked significantly better concealed. It later became known that during testing, the UCP uniform showed the worst results among all the options considered. Nevertheless, it was chosen, partly because the Army wanted to visually distinguish itself from the Marine Corps. By 2015, the United States Army completely replaced UCP with a new camouflage, OCP, Operational Camouflage Pattern, which is significantly more effective. The cost of purchasing, distributing, and replacing the UCP uniform, according to various estimates, was about $5 billion over its entire period of use, a uniform that made soldiers more visible. Chosen because the Army wanted to differ from the Marine Corps. $5 billion and 10 years. 6 decisions. 6 different ways to spend taxpayers' money on something that didn't work. The difference between a right decision and an expensive mistake is often visible only in hindsight. What makes it expensive is that in hindsight, it is always visible. And they don't give the money back. Write in the comments, which of the 6 decisions seems the most pointless to you? And subscribe. There are many more stories ahead about how right logic leads to wrong results.